You know what's funny about being a truck driver? Everyone thinks it's about the freedom of the open road, but really, it's about confronting how small you are. Out here in the cab of my Peterbilt, pushing 18 wheels across America's arteries, you realize the highway doesn't care about your problems, your mortgage, or whether your ex-wife finally signed those papers. My name's Caleb Thorne, and I've been hauling freight for 23 years. Started when I was 19, right after my old man had his heart attack loading boxes at the warehouse. Mom needed money, and the trucking company promised decent pay for someone willing to drive the routes nobody else wanted. Routes like Highway 666. Yeah, that's a real road. Runs through New Mexico, cutting across some of the loneliest country you'll ever see. Most drivers call it the Devil's Highway, though the state renamed it 491 back in 2003 because of all the trouble. Accidents, thefts, weird stuff that made headlines. But we still call it 666 because some names stick whether you want them to or not. I've hauled everything from Christmas toys to industrial chemicals across that stretch of asphalt. 47 trips to be exact. I keep count because counting keeps your mind busy when you're staring at endless desert and your CB radio's picking up nothing but static and Mexican stations bleeding through the atmosphere. See, long-haul trucking teaches you things about yourself, like how your brain starts talking to itself after hour 12 of driving straight. How you begin having conversations with the voices on talk radio, like they can hear you arguing back. How you start seeing patterns in roadkill, wondering if that coyote died because it was running towards something or away from it. But mostly, trucking teaches you that everyone's got their breaking point. Mine came last Tuesday, somewhere between mile marker 47 and 48 on Highway 666, when I glanced in my passenger side mirror and saw something that made my hands shake so hard, I nearly jackknifed my rig into the median. Before I tell you what I saw, you need to understand something. I'm not the type who believes in ghost stories or conspiracy theories. I've driven through every state in this country, seen drunk drivers wrapped around telephone poles, watched highway patrols scrape what's left of speeders off guardrails. Death is just physics. Metal meeting flesh at high velocity. Nothing supernatural about it. Or at least, that's what I believed until I started seeing the bike rider. No, I'm telling you this story because maybe you'll be driving that route someday. Maybe you'll be heading west on 666, hauling whatever pays the bills, when you glance in your mirror and see what I saw. When that happens, and I pray it doesn't, remember what I'm about to tell you. Whatever you do, no matter what you see or hear or think you understand, don't stop driving. The first time I drove Highway 666, I was 22 and thought I knew everything about trucking. Fresh off my CDL training, eager to prove myself to the dispatcher, who'd given me a chance when other companies wouldn't even return my calls. My trainer, an old-timer named Dutch Kowalski, rode shotgun that first run, chewing tobacco and spitting into an old Folgers can. "This route pays extra for a reason," Dutch had said, adjusting his baseball cap. "Not because it's dangerous. Hell, most of I-80 through Wyoming is more likely to kill you. It's because drivers don't like the feel of it." I'd laughed at that, young and stupid, thinking feel was something old truckers invented to scare rookies. Dutch just shrugged and went back to his crossword puzzle, occasionally pointing out landmarks. The abandoned trading post at mile marker 23, the cluster of white crosses where a family station wagon had rolled 3 times in 1987, the spot where lightning struck the same power line every summer. That first trip taught me Dutch was right about the feel. Something about 666 sits wrong in your chest, like you're driving through a photograph instead of actual landscape. The shadows fall differently here, creating pockets of darkness that seem too deep for the time of day. Radio stations fade in and out without warning, sometimes picking up broadcasts in languages I couldn't identify. But the pay was good, real good, nearly double what I made on standard freight runs. So I kept taking the route, trip after trip, year after year. Built up a reputation as the guy who'd haul anything across 666 without complaint. Other drivers started calling me Devil's Highway Caleb, and I wore that nickname like a badge of honor. My wife Sarah hated it. She'd grown up in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, where strange stories got passed down through generations like family recipes. "That road has a history," she'd tell me over dinner, her fork pushing mashed potatoes around her plate. "People die there more than they should." "People die everywhere, Sarah," I'd respond. "At least this road pays our mortgage." She'd go quiet after that, staring out our kitchen window at the neighbor's fence like she could see something I couldn't. We had those conversations maybe a dozen times before she finally stopped bringing it up. Now I wonder if she gave up trying to warn me, or if she just accepted that some men are too stubborn to save. Sarah left me 3 years ago, packed her things while I was hauling electronics to Phoenix, left a note saying she couldn't watch me disappear piece by piece into that highway. At the time, I thought she was being dramatic. Trucking puts strain on marriages, everyone knows that. Long stretches away from home, irregular sleep, the constant stress of deadlines and DOT inspections. But looking back, I realized she saw something changing in me that I couldn't see myself. How I'd come home from 666 runs quieter than usual, distracted, like part of my attention had stayed out there in the desert. How I'd stand at our bedroom window some nights, staring west toward New Mexico, feeling pulled back to that ribbon of asphalt cutting through the wasteland. The divorce papers came through certified mail on a Tuesday. That same afternoon, my dispatcher called with another 666 run, refrigerated trailer full of medical supplies heading to Albuquerque. I should have turned it down, taken some time to process what my life was becoming. Instead, I fired up the Peterbilt and headed west, because that highway was the only thing left that made sense to me. The bike rider first appeared on my 31st trip across 666. I was hauling auto parts to Flagstaff, running about 2 hours behind schedule because of a way station inspection in Tucumcari. The sun was setting behind me, painting the desert in shades of rust and gold, when I noticed movements in my passenger side mirror. At first, I figured it was just another motorcycle trying to pass. Happens all the time on 2-lane highways. Bikers get impatient behind big rigs, especially on stretches where passing opportunities are scarce. But this rider wasn't accelerating to get around me, just maintaining distance, maybe 50 yards back, matching my speed exactly. I adjusted my mirror for a better look. The bike appeared to be an older model, maybe from the 70s or 80s, with high handlebars and a dark paint job that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. The rider wore a leather jacket and jeans, no helmet, which struck me as odd. New Mexico has a helmet law, and most cops along 666 are happy to write tickets for easy revenue. Mile after mile, the bike stayed in position, never closer, never farther. When I slowed down for a construction zone, the rider slowed too. When I picked up speed on a straightaway, there he was in my mirror, maintaining that exact distance like we were connected by an invisible chain. After about 20 minutes, I reached for my CB radio. "Brigger 19, this is Devil's Highway Caleb, heading westbound on 666. Anyone else seeing this motorcycle behind me?" Static crackled through the speaker. Then a voice I recognized. Jimbo Martinez. Drives for the same company, probably 40 miles ahead of me. "Negative on any bikes, Caleb. Been watching my mirrors all afternoon. Why?" I looked in the mirror again. Still there. Rider's face obscured by shadow despite the fading daylight. "Got a bike that's been following me for the last half hour. Maintaining exact distance, not trying to pass." "Could be mechanical trouble," Jimbo suggested. "Maybe his throttle's stuck or something. You want to pull over? See if he needs help?" The words were out of my mouth before I could think about them. No. Something doesn't feel right about this. Where did that come from? In 20-plus years of driving, I'd always been the guy who stopped for stranded motorists, fixed flat tires with my emergency kit, shared coffee from my thermos with drivers waiting for tow trucks, even given rides to people whose cars had broken down in the middle of nowhere. But looking at that bike rider in my mirror, every instinct I had screamed against pulling over. 10-4, Caleb. Keep an eye on it. Holler if you need backup. The radio went quiet. I kept driving, checking my mirror every few seconds. The rider never moved from that spot, never varied his distance, never even turned his head to look at something on the roadside, just maintained that steady pace, following me through the desert like a shadow with an engine. 40 miles later, just past the junction with State Route 9, the bike vanished. One second it was there in my mirror, the next second the road behind me was empty. I hit the brakes, pulled onto the shoulder, and climbed out of my cab to get a better look. Nothing. No dust cloud, no tire marks, no sign that a motorcycle had ever been on that highway. I called Jimbo on the radio. "Hey, did you see a bike pass you in the last few minutes?" "Negative, buddy. Haven't seen anything but tumbleweeds for the last hour." That night, I pulled into a truck stop in Gallup and couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me there. I kept glancing over my shoulder in the diner, expecting to see a leather-jacketed figure watching me from the parking lot. Checked my mirrors obsessively during my mandatory rest period, scanning for that dark motorcycle among the rows of parked trucks. But I didn't see the rider again until my 34th trip, 3 months later. The second encounter came on a gray February morning, the kind where the sky looks like old concrete and the desert stretches out like a photograph someone left in the sun too long. I was hauling frozen goods to Santa Fe, running empty on coffee and patience after fighting crosswinds all night. The load was time-sensitive, restaurant supply contract with penalty clauses that could cost me a week's pay if I delivered late. So when I spotted the bike rider in my mirror around mile marker 62, I told myself I was seeing things. Fatigue hallucinations, common enough among long-haul drivers who push too hard. But hallucinations don't maintain perfect distance for 37 miles. This time I got a better look. Same leather jacket, same high handlebars, but something about the rider's posture seemed wrong. He sat too still, shoulders square, head facing forward like a mannequin. No normal person rides a motorcycle that rigidly. Your body moves with the bike, compensates for wind and road irregularities, shifts weight through curves. This rider moved like he was welded to the seat. When I reached the truck stop in Cuba, New Mexico, I parked near the diesel pumps and walked around my rig, pretending to check my trailer doors while scanning the parking lot. No motorcycle, no rider. But the skin between my shoulder blades itched like someone was watching me from the shadows between buildings. Inside the truck stop, I recognized Tommy Vasquez sitting at the counter, stirring sugar in the black coffee. Tommy drives for a competing company, but we'd crossed paths enough times to nod hello. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Red eyes, stubble, that hollow expression truckers get when they've been pushing too hard for too long. "Hey, Tommy," I said, sliding onto the stool beside him. "You been running 666 lately?" He glanced up from his coffee cup. "Just came off it yesterday. Why?" "You ever see anything strange out there?" Tommy's spoon stopped stirring. He looked at me sideways, the way people do when they're deciding whether to trust you with something that sounds crazy. "What kind of strange?" "Motorcycle rider. Follows behind at the same distance. Never tries to pass." The color drained from Tommy's face. He set down his spoon carefully, like it might break if you move too fast. "Black bike? Rider in leather?" My stomach dropped. "You've seen him too." 3 times in the last 6 months. Tommy's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "First time, I thought maybe it was some kind of escort. You know, like when they transport hazardous materials. But my manifest was just construction supplies. Nothing worth escorting." He leaned closer, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. Second time, I tried to get a picture with my phone. As soon as I held it up to the mirror, my whole electrical system went haywire. Radio cutting in and out, dashboard lights flickering, GPS showing me in the middle of the ocean. What about the third time? Tommy stared into his coffee like he could see something floating in the dark liquid. Third time, I made the mistake of stopping. The Donner suddenly felt too quiet. Even the constant hum of the soda machine seemed muted, like the air had thickened around us. I pulled over at that scenic overlook near mile marker 78. Tommy continued. Figured I'd wait, see what this guy wanted. Maybe he was having engine trouble, needed help. I'm sitting there for maybe 5 minutes when I hear this tapping on my passenger door. He paused, rubbing his temples with thick fingers scarred from years of handling cargo chains and tie-downs. But here's the thing, Caleb. The tapping was coming from outside, but when I looked in my mirror, the bike was still sitting 50 yards behind me. Same position as always. Rider hadn't moved. My coffee had gone cold in my hands. What did you do? I got the hell out of there, fired up my engine and drove straight through to Albuquerque without stopping again. But that night, in the motel, I kept hearing that tapping. On the window, on the bathroom door, on the walls. Tap, tap, tap. Like someone trying to get my attention. Tommy finished his coffee in one gulp and stood up, dropping a $5 bill on the counter. I don't run 666 anymore, Caleb. Found other routes, even if they pay less. Whatever that thing is, it's not looking for help. It's looking for something else. What do you think it wants? He was already walking toward the door, but he stopped and looked back at me. You know what bothers me most? The whole time I was sitting at that overlook, I could see the rider in my mirror. Never moved, never turned his head. But somehow I knew he was smiling. After Tommy left, I sat at the counter for another 20 minutes, staring at my reflection in the chrome napkin dispenser. The rational part of my brain tried to find logical explanations. Optical illusions caused by heat shimmer, coincidental encounters with the same motorcycle enthusiasts who happen to travel that route regularly, shared hallucinations brought on by highway hypnosis and too much caffeine. But I kept thinking about Tommy's description of the tapping and how the rider had somehow been in two places at once. When I climbed back into my cab, I made a decision that would haunt me for the rest of the trip. Instead of avoiding 666 like Tommy had, I was going to solve this mystery. Next time I saw the bike rider, I was going to find out what he wanted. Looking back now, I realized that was exactly what he'd been waiting for. 3 weeks after my conversation with Tommy, I was hauling machine parts to Phoenix when the bike rider appeared again. This time I was ready. I'd spent those 3 weeks researching everything I could find about Highway 666. Old newspaper archives, accident reports, local folklore collected by amateur historians with too much time on their hands. What I found painted the picture of a road that had been claiming lives since it was first paved in 1938. The death toll wasn't particularly high, no more than any other remote highway cutting through desert terrain, but the circumstances were often bizarre. Single-vehicle accidents where drivers apparently steered into ravines for no discernible reason. Fatalities involving experienced motorcyclists who somehow lost control on straight, well-maintained sections of road. Search and rescue operations for people who simply vanished. The vehicles found empty with keys still in the ignition. Most interesting was a pattern I noticed from reports from the 1970s and 80s. Multiple witnesses described seeing a motorcyclist just before or just after accidents occurred. Always the same description: dark bike, leather-clad rider, maintaining distance from other vehicles. Police initially suspected a connection, maybe someone who preyed on stranded motorists, but they could never find physical evidence of the motorcycle's presence. The reports stopped appearing in the 1990s, not because the sightings ended, I suspected, but because people stopped reporting them. Who wants to sound crazy in an official statement? Now, rolling westbound at dusk with 26 tons of cargo behind me, I watched the bike rider materialize in my passenger mirror like smoke taking shape. Same position as always, same rigid posture, same darkness that seemed to absorb the fading daylight. This time, instead of fear, I felt a strange mix of curiosity and determination. I'd driven this route 47 times without incident. Whatever this thing wanted, whatever game it was playing, I was going to end it tonight. I reached for my CB radio. Breaker 19, any westbound traffic on 666, this is Devil's Highway Caleb at mile marker 54. Static answered me. I tried again, adjusting the squelch. Nothing. The radio had worked fine an hour ago when I checked in with my dispatcher. In my mirror, the rider maintained his position, 50 yards back, centered in the lane, following my exact speed. I pressed the accelerator, pushing my rig up to 75. The rider stayed with me. I slowed to 55. Still there, maintaining that precise distance like we were connected by an invisible cable. Mile marker 78 came into view, the scenic overlook where Tommy had made his mistake. I could see the wide shoulder, the weathered picnic table, the interpretive sign explaining the geological features of the surrounding badlands. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. This was it. Decision time. I flicked on my turn signal and began slowing down. Watching the mirrors, I pulled onto the gravel shoulder. The bike rider slowed with me, maintaining his distance even as we came to a stop. For a moment, we sat there in the growing darkness, my 18-wheeler with its running lights casting amber pools on the gravel, and 50 yards behind me, a motorcycle that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. I grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket and climbed down from the cab. The desert air was cold against my face, carrying the scent of sage and something else, something metallic and sharp that reminded me of the snow after lightning strikes. The motorcycle sat exactly where I'd expected it, engine running but making no sound I could hear over the wind. The rider remained motionless, hands on the handlebars, face hidden in shadow despite my flashlight being cutting through the darkness. "You having trouble?" I called out, taking a step closer. No response. The rider didn't move, didn't acknowledge my presence. Up close, I could see details that hadn't been visible in my mirror. The leather jacket was old style, the kind with metal studs and zippered pockets. The jeans were faded nearly white at the knees. The boots were engineer boots, worn and scuffed. And the bike itself, a 1973 Harley-Davidson Sportster, black paint dulled by years of desert dust and sun damage. I knew enough about motorcycles to recognize the model, but something was wrong with the proportions. The handlebars seemed too high, the seat too wide, like I was looking at a photograph that had been stretched in places. "Hey," I called louder, taking another step. "You okay over there?" The rider's head turned toward me. That's when I saw his face, or what was left of it. The flesh had been scraped away down to bone on the right side, leaving exposed teeth grinning through absent cheek. His left eye was gone, the socket filled with shadow. What remained of his skin had the gray-white color of old meat, stretched tight over skull contours that seemed too sharp. But it was his remaining eye that made my stomach lurch. It focused on me with an intelligence that was entirely human, entirely aware, and entirely wrong. "You stopped," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the distance despite having no lips to form the words properly. "Finally, you stopped." I stumbled backward, my flashlight beam wavering. What do you want?" The rider swung his leg over the bike and stood up. His movements were fluid but somehow off rhythm, like watching a film with the frames slightly out of sequence. "Same thing I've always wanted, Caleb. Same thing I've been asking for since 1983. I don't understand." He took a step toward me, then another. With each step, his appearance shifted slightly, sometimes more flesh, sometimes more bone, like my eyes couldn't decide what they were seeing. A ride. Just a ride to the next stop. My bike broke down 42 years ago, right here, at mile marker 78. I've been waiting for someone to stop. The lie was obvious. His bike was clearly running. I could see exhaust shimmering in the cold air behind him, could smell the distinctive scent of burning oil. But his remaining eye held such desperate hope that part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to offer help like I would to any stranded motorist. "Where do you need to go?" I heard myself ask. "Flagstaff. I've got a girl waiting there. Was going to ask her to marry me." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Been carrying this ring for 42 years. The box looked new, untouched by time. The rider held it out toward me like an offering. "Please," he said. "I just want to see her again." Every rational thought in my head screamed against it, but I found myself nodding. "Okay. Yeah, okay. Climb up in the cab. We'll get you to Flagstaff." His face, what was left of it, stretched into something that might have been a smile. That's when I realized my mistake. The temperature dropped 20 degrees the moment the rider started walking toward my cab. Not gradually, like desert nights usually cool down, but all at once, like someone had opened a freezer door. My breath came out in puffs of vapor that hadn't been there seconds before. Frost began forming on my truck's windshield, spreading outward in patterns that looked almost like fingerprints. "Actually," I said, backing toward the driver's door, "maybe I should radio for a tow truck instead." "Get your bike looked at properly." The rider stopped walking, his head tilted to one side. Too far to one side, at an angle that would have snapped a living person's neck. "You already said yes, Caleb." "I know, but you can't take it back now." There was something in his voice, beneath the words, that made my teeth ache. Like standing too close to high-voltage power lines, that electric hum that you feel in your bones before you hear it. I fumbled for my door handle, but my fingers had gone numb with cold. The metal felt like it would burn my skin if I touched it. "Look, I'm sorry, but this doesn't feel right. Maybe someone else will come along who can help you better." No one else stops anymore. His voice carried a note of sadness that seemed genuine. "Haven't had a conversation with a living person in 7 years. He wouldn't believe how lonely it gets." Despite everything, the wrong face, the wrong temperature, the wrong way shadows moved around him, I felt a stab of sympathy. Truck driving teaches you about loneliness. Those long stretches between cities, hours of highway hypnosis with only radio voices for company, the way other people's lives seem to happen behind windows you drive past but never enter. 7 years? I asked. "Since the last driver stopped. Nice fellow, reminded me of my brother. Drove a blue Kenworth, had pictures of his grandkids taped to his dashboard." The rider's remaining eye focused on something beyond me, like he was watching a memory play out in the darkness. We had a good talk. He told me about his wife's battle with cancer, how he was working extra shifts to pay for treatments. What happened to him? The rider's expression shifted, and for a moment the damage to his face seemed to heal itself, showing me what he might have looked like alive. Young, maybe 25, with the kind of earnest features that belonged on high school yearbook photos. Same thing that happened to all of them, Caleb. Same thing that's going to happen to you. The sympathy I'd felt evaporated, replaced by the purest fear I'd ever experienced. My legs turned to water. My vision tunneled. Every survival instinct I possessed screamed at me to run, but my body wouldn't respond. You see, the rider continued, walking closer. I died right here on the spot. October 15th, 1983, around 11:30 p.m. Bike hit a patch of black ice. Freak weather, freezing rain in the desert, and I went down doing 70. Slid for maybe 30 yards before I hit that rock outcropping. He gestured toward a cluster of boulders at the edge of the overlook. In the beam of my flashlight, I could see dark stains on the stone that I'd somehow missed before. Took me 6 hours to die. Broken ribs punctured my lung, compound fractures in both legs. I kept thinking someone would come along, stop to help. But this was before cell phones, before GPS tracking. Just me and the desert and the stars. My mouth had gone completely dry. I'm sorry that happened to you, but the last thing I remember thinking, he interrupted, was how unfair it was. All those times I'd stopped for stranded motorists, helped people change tires, shared my water with overheated tourists. But when I needed help, when my life depended on it, car after car just drove by. Even saw brake lights a few times, people slowing down to look, then speeding up again because stopping for strangers felt too risky. He was close enough now that I could smell him. Not decay like you'd expect, but something worse. The scent of hopes that had curdled, of love that had turned rancid from waiting too long. So I made a decision. Lying there in the gravel with my blood leaking into the sand. If I was going to die because people wouldn't stop, then I'd make sure other people shared that experience. You're the one causing the accidents, I whispered. Not causing them. Just collecting people who understand what it feels like to need help and have it denied. People who stop get to experience what I experienced. Fair exchange. That's not fair. That's murder. His laugh sounded like wind through broken glass. Is it murder when you give someone exactly what they chose? He decided to stop Caleb. He made the same choice those other drivers refused to make for me. Behind him, his motorcycle revved its engine without a rider. The headlight flickered in a rhythm that reminded me of Morse code, though I couldn't decipher what message it might be spelling out. I've been watching you for years, the rider continued. 47 trips across my highway. 47 times you drove past this exact spot where I died. You know what made you different from other truckers? I shook my head, not trusting my voice. You always slowed down when you passed mile marker 78. Just a little. Like you could sense something had happened here. Most people don't pick up on that energy, but you did. Made me curious about you. So you started following me. Testing you. Waiting to see if you were one of the good ones. The kind who'd stop for a stranger in trouble. Then you are Caleb. You're exactly the kind of person I needed to meet. The frost on my windshield had spread to cover the entire surface, forming intricate patterns that looked almost like a map. A map of Highway 666, with X marks at specific locations. More locations than I wanted to count. How many? I asked. Drivers who stopped? You'll be number 17. 17 families who'd lost fathers, husbands, sons. 17 funerals with closed caskets because the remains were too damaged to display. 17 unsolved disappearances along a stretch of highway that already had a reputation for claiming lives. The other drivers who saw you? I said. Tommy Vasquez? The ones who didn't stop? They get to keep driving. For now. But seeing me changes people, plants a seed of guilt that grows over time. Eventually they come back. They always come back. Tommy said he won't drive this route anymore. Tommy will be back within a year. They always convince themselves they imagined it, but they need to prove to themselves they're not going crazy. And when they do come back, they'll stop. Guilt makes them stop. The rider reached out and touched the side of my truck. Where his fingers made contact, the paint began to blacken and peel. Time to go, Caleb. I've got a ring to deliver, and you've got a ride to finish. The rider's touch spread across my truck like a disease. Paint bubbled and flaked away, revealing metal underneath that began to rust at an accelerated pace. Within seconds, corrosion had eaten through the entire passenger side panel, leaving jagged holes that looked like screaming mouths. Don't do this, I said, finally finding my voice. Please. I have a daughter I've never met. Sarah was pregnant when she left me, but she never told me. I found out 3 months ago through a friend. Girl named Emma, lives in Portland. I was going to drive up there after this run. Try to be a father. The rider paused, his hand still pressed against the rotting metal. You're lying. I'm not. I swear I'm not. The words tumbled out desperately, a drowning man grabbing at anything that might float. Her name is Emma Sarah Thorne. She's 2 years old, likes dinosaurs and ice cream, and those little books with the fuzzy animals you can pet. How would you know what she likes if you've never met her? Sarah sends pictures sometimes. Videos. I got one last week of Emma singing Wheels in the Bus in her car seat. She's got my eyes, but Sarah's smile. I've been too scared to contact them directly, afraid Sarah would get a restraining order or move somewhere I couldn't find them. The decay spreading across my truck slowed but didn't stop. The rider's remaining eye studied my face, searching for deception. Even if that's true, it doesn't change anything. You stopped. The choice is made. But you said the drivers you target understand what it's like to need help and be denied. I've never denied help to anyone. I've always stopped. Until tonight. What? His smile revealed broken teeth and blackened gums. 3 miles back. Mile marker 75. Did you see the woman with the flat tire? My stomach dropped. I had seen her, a middle-aged woman in a business suit, standing beside her white sedan with the hood up, cell phone pressed to her ear. But I've been so focused on watching for the bike rider in my mirror that I'd driven right past without even slowing down. She was there for 40 minutes. The rider continued. No cell service in that dead zone. Car overheated because she didn't know enough to check the radiator before driving through the desert. By the time AAA finally found her, she'd drunk the last of her water and was starting to show signs of heat exhaustion. The weight of my hypocrisy crashed down on me. All those years of pride in being the trucker who helped stranded motorists, and tonight, the night it mattered most, I'd failed someone who genuinely needed assistance. You see, we're not so different, you and I. We both know what it's like to be abandoned when we need help most. I was distracted. I was looking for you in my mirror I didn't see. You saw her. You chose not to stop because helping her wasn't convenient, wasn't safe, wasn't worth the risk. His voice carried the satisfaction of a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. Just like all those drivers who chose not to stop for me. The corrosion had reached my cab now, eating through the door frame. Soon the structural integrity would fail completely, trapping me inside a coffin of rotting metal. I could feel the truck settling unevenly as the decay weakened the chassis. What happens to the trucks? I asked. The other 17 drivers. The rigs would have been found. Oh, they're found. Eventually. Always the same story. Single vehicle accident. Driver lost control and rolled into a ravine. Cargo scattered. Cab crushed beyond recognition. Nobody looks too closely at accident scenes out here. Desert claims a lot of vehicles. He pulled his hand away from the truck, but the decay continued spreading. Soon it would reach the fuel tanks, and then... The ring, I said suddenly. You said you were going to propose to someone in Flagstaff. What was her name? The rider's expression flickered. For just a moment, the damage to his face seemed to fade, revealing more of the young man he'd once been. Rebecca Martinez. We'd been dating since high school. She's probably still there. 42 years later, she might still be in Flagstaff. You could find her, see what happened to her life. She's dead. The words came out flat, emotionless. Died in 1997. Cancer. I watched her funeral from the highway. Couldn't get close, the daylight, you understand, but I saw the procession. Saw them lower her casket into the ground. I'm sorry. She waited for me, Caleb. 15 years she waited. Never married anyone else. Never moved away from the apartment we picked out together. Kept my picture on her nightstand until the day she died. The decay had reached my fuel tanks. I could smell diesel pouring onto the gravel, creating a pool that reflected the desert stars like spilled blood. So what's the point? I asked. If she's gone, what's the point of the ring, the proposal, any of this? The point, he said, reaching into his jacket again, is that some promises should be kept, even if you're 42 years late. The velvet ring box in his hand began to glow with a soft, warm light that pushed back the unnatural cold. As I watched, his appearance continued to shift, showing me glimpses of who he'd been before the accident. A young man in love, nervous about proposing, full of hope for a future that would never come. She's waiting for me, Caleb, on the other side. And when I give her this ring, we'll both be able to rest. Then why do you need me? His face hardened again, returning to its damaged state. Because I can't cross over while I'm still angry. And I can't stop being angry while people keep driving past others who need help. Every driver who stops for me proves that kindness still exists, though not everyone is selfish. But then you kill them. I give them peace, the same peace I'm looking for. The truck groaned and tilted as the frame finally gave way. The cab lurched sideways as the passenger side frame collapsed completely, sending me sprawling against the driver's door. Through the windshield, now spiderwebbed with cracks, I could see the fuel pooling beneath my truck, vapor rising from the diesel like desert mirages. "You don't have to do this," I said, struggling to maintain my footing as the entire rig continued to settle unevenly. "Rebecca wouldn't want this. She wouldn't want you killing innocent people in her name." The rider climbed onto what remained of my running board, moving with that same fluid yet wrong motion I noticed before. Up close, the damage to his face was even more grotesque. Bone showed through gaps in flesh that looked like torn leather, and when he smiled, I could see straight through his cheek to his molars. "You think you knew her?" His voice carried a bitter edge. "You never met Rebecca Martinez. Never saw how she lit up when she talked about our future together. Never watched her practice signing her name as Rebecca Castellanos because she was so excited to become my wife." "Castellanos? I thought your name was Miguel Castellanos. But nobody calls me Miguel anymore. Haven't heard that name spoken aloud since my funeral." He reached through the broken door frame, his fingers trailing frost across the torn upholstery. "Funny how people forget your real name once you become a ghost story." The truck groaned again, metal screaming as structural supports gave way. I had maybe minutes before the whole thing collapsed in the scrap metal and twisted wreckage. But something in his voice, the way he'd said his real name, gave me an idea. "Rebecca would remember," I said. "She'd remember Miguel, the man she loved. Not this, whatever you've become." His hand stopped moving. "Don't." She waited 15 years for Miguel to come home. Not for a vengeful spirit, not for someone who murders truck drivers. She waited for the man who was going to propose with that ring. Shut up. When you see her again, if you see her, what are you going to tell her? That you spent 42 years killing people instead of finding peace? That you used her memory to justify murder? They deserved it. His shout was loud enough to rattle what was left of my windows. Every single one of them deserved it for not stopping, for being selfish, for caring more about their schedules than human suffering. I deserved it, I said quietly. You read about that. I drove past that woman tonight because I was too focused on my own problems to see hers. But what about the others? Driver number 3, number 8, number 12. What had they done wrong besides showing kindness to a stranger? The decay spreading across my truck began to slow. Miguel's remaining eye focused on me with an intensity that felt like being dissected. You said yourself that the good ones stop, I continued. The ones who understand what it's like to need help. So you're not punishing the selfish drivers who pass by. You're killing the compassionate ones. The people who would have stopped for you if they'd been there that night. It's not about punishment. His voice had dropped to barely a whisper. It's about what, Miguel? He stared at the ring box in his hand, its warm glow reflecting off his exposed cheekbone. It's about proving they exist. The good people. If I can keep finding them, keep collecting them, then maybe Rebecca will forgive you. Maybe I can forgive myself. The emission hung in the desert air between us. For a moment, Miguel looked exactly like what he was. A young man who'd died alone and afraid, who'd spent 4 decades trying to make sense of senseless tragedy. She already forgave you, I said. The moment you died, she forgave you for not making it to Flagstaff, for not proposing that night, for leaving her alone. That's what love is. Forgiving someone for things that were never their fault to begin with. Miguel's form began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from sun-baked asphalt. The decay on my truck stopped spreading entirely, but the damage already done left the vehicle barely recognizable. I can't let you go, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. The choice was made. He stopped. Then don't let me go. But don't kill me either. I pulled out my wallet, extracting the worn photo I'd carried for 3 years. Sarah holding a baby girl, with my eyes in her mother's smile. Let me live long enough to meet my daughter. Let me be the father I never had a chance to be. And when my time comes naturally, when I'm old and ready to cross over, I'll find you and Rebecca wherever you are. I'll tell her how much you loved her. Miguel stared at the photo, his remaining eye filling with something that might have been tears if the dead could cry. You promise? I promise. The ring box's glow intensified, casting shadows that danced across the broken landscape like memories trying to take solid form. Miguel Castellanos held the ring box for a long moment, its light growing brighter until it illuminated the entire overlook. In that glow, I could see him as he'd been, 25 years old, nervous about proposing, wearing a clean white t-shirt and jeans without holes, young and alive and full of hope. She had a birthmark, he said softly, right here on her left shoulder. He touched a spot on his own ruined flesh, shaped like a crescent moon. She was always self-conscious about it, but I thought it was beautiful, like God had marked her as special. The ring box opened with a soft click. Inside, a simple gold band with a modest diamond caught the supernatural light and threw rainbows across the broken landscape. I was going to tell her she was my moon, Miguel continued, that I wanted to orbit around her for the rest of my life. Sounds stupid now, but I was 25. Everything felt like poetry. It doesn't sound stupid, I said. It sounds like love. Miguel smiled, really smiled, not the broken grimace I'd seen before. Yeah, it was. The light from the ring grew blindingly bright. When it faded, Miguel was gone. The motorcycle was gone. My truck, and possibly it was whole again, paint gleaming, engine humming, no sign of the supernatural decay that had nearly consumed it. I stood alone at mile marker 78, holding my flashlight in the desert silence. On the ground where Miguel had been standing, someone had carved words into a flat piece of sandstone, the letters filled with gold that seemed to glow with its own inner light. Rebecca Martinez, beloved of Miguel. He kept his promise. That was 15 years ago. I kept my promise too. I drove straight to Portland that next morning, knocked on Sarah's door, and met my daughter for the first time. Emma was too then, suspicious of the stranger her mother led into their kitchen, but curious enough to show me her collection of plastic dinosaurs. It took 3 years of supervised visits, child support payments, and family counseling before Sarah trusted me enough to let Emma stay weekends at my apartment. It took 5 years before Emma started calling me Dad instead of Caleb. It took 7 years before Sarah admitted she'd always hoped I'd find them. We remarried last spring. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Emma walked her mother down the aisle. Her idea, wearing a dress the color of desert sunsets. I still drive truck, but I don't take the 666 route anymore. Not because I'm afraid. Miguel Castellanos found his peace that night. I'm certain of it. But because that highway belongs to other drivers now. Drivers who need to make their own choices about stopping or not stopping. Sometimes, late at night when I'm running freight across I-40 or I-10, I'll see headlights in my mirror that maintain perfect distance for miles at a time. But these aren't supernatural followers. They're just other truckers, keeping pace through the darkness, finding comfort and shared solitude. Emma's 18 now, heading to college in the fall to study veterinary medicine. She wants to work with large animals, maybe open a practice somewhere rural where her help would make a real difference. She has her mother's compassion and my stubborn streak, a dangerous combination in the best possible way. Yesterday, she asked me to teach her to drive truck. Just in case, she said. Every woman should know how to handle 18 wheels. I told her I'd think about it. Truth is, I'm proud she asked. But if I do teach her, there's one route we'll never take together. One stretch of highway where some lessons are too dangerous to learn. Some roads are better left to ghosts and their memories. But if you ever find yourself driving Highway 666, or Route 491 as the signs call it now, and you see a bike rider in your mirror, remember Miguel's story. Remember that stopping for strangers can be dangerous, but so can forgetting how to be human. The choice, as always, is yours.